Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Pictionary. I'm a member of the Peace Center here at Lane. I'm also a student. Um, I am absolutely honored and thrilled to announce Good Shield Aguilar as a activist and spokesman for the last wild, genetically pure buffalo herd in Yellowstone, Montana. I also want to thank him and Mignon for making the trek up here and blessing us with that beautiful music earlier this morning. Thank you all for coming.
But basically, Buffalo Field Campaign, we've been in existence. This is actually our 16th year. Buffalo Field Campaign started in 1996. I don't know if, I feel funny talking about El Nino. I don't know if anybody remembers that huge weather front that came through. And like, I've lived in Humboldt County since actually that same year is when I moved there. And to this day, like the ecosystem is not the same. There's great white sharks from Baja, California that are still there that normally wouldn't be there. A lot of migratory birds, a lot of gray jays, starlings, even a lot of crows that originally were in the Central Valley of California. So anyway, it just, that year it seemed like a really, like the whole world was just kind of going through this big transition, you know, and Yellowstone was no different. There was probably one of the most severe storms in the last century, and it caused these buffalo to leave the park by the thousands. And that year, I think it was about 980 buffalo were killed that year. My good friend Mike Meese, who's the co-founder of the Buffalo Field Campaign, he was actually out there videotaping what was going on with these buffalo, and the Department of Livestock and the Parks Department, who were doing this to the buffalo, they wouldn't give him an answer of why, other than it's for disease control. Like buffalo are actually considered, they're not considered wildlife in the state of Montana. They're considered an animal in need of disease control. So Mike, he took that video to a lot of tribal leaders, and my aunt Rosalie Little Thunder was the first one to actually go out to Yellowstone and see what was going on. And she knew right away she had to do something. So she organized, that same winter, she organized a walk. She actually walked from Rapid City, South Dakota, all the way to Gardner, Montana, which is 517 miles. And fortunately, PBS documented the whole walk, and they did a documentary about it. It's called The Buffalo Battle, or Buffalo Wars. And you can actually go to the PBS website, and there's like every film they've ever had on PBS, I'm pretty sure you could find on their website. But it got so much publicity around it that the following year, no buffalo were killed. So it's things like that, you know, that really help. It's people knowing. It's not so much other. But it's, you know, the Buffalo Field Campaign, we are the only grassroots organization who are out there with the buffalo all year long. There's other, I won't mention any names, but there's other, we call them the corporate environmentalists. You know, they pretty much have a CEO who makes a lot of money. They go to all these conferences and fundraise, and that money never goes to helping buffalo. And some organizations have actually used some of our footage. And it's the video camera that is actually our weapon. You know, we can't legally put ourselves out there unless we want to get arrested. We've had many people get arrested in the past. You know, in the last 16 years, there's probably been, I'd say, 5 years that were really bad, where, you know, hundreds and hundreds of buffalo were killed. 2 years ago, I think, was a pretty mellow year, luckily, but it was because it wasn't really a winter. It was probably the least amount of snow that Montana has had in the last century. You know, the whole weather thing, it's definitely changing things right now. But anyway, I'll talk a little bit more, but I wanted to show this film. This was actually the same people who came out and did the buffalo, or not came out, but they did the whale wars. I don't know if anybody's seen the whale wars on Animal Planet. Well, those same people came out to the BFC 3 years ago, and they did something called the Buffalo Battle. You know, we all know through history that there was probably somewhere between 30 and 60 million buffalo, and within 5 years, that number, because of the Transcontinental Railroad and other railroads, you know, they're literally killed by the millions. You know, every year by the millions. And it was General Sheridan who actually said that the buffalo hunters have done more to bring the indigenous people of this continent to their knees than the cavalry have, mainly because they took away our food source, our commissary, our medicine, our everything. You know, I'm Lakota, so we followed the buffalo. Everywhere they went, we would follow them. Try to get our things together before the winter hit. General Sheridan. And the brucellosis thing you heard, there's never been a documented case of transmission of this disease from a buffalo to a cow. So this is all fear-based politics. And basically, the only reason these cattle ranchers are there was during the Great Depression, the government wanted to boost the economy, so they allowed these cattle ranchers to come in and graze 2 cows for $1.80. To this day, what is this, 2014? They still pay $1.80 for 2 cows, where if they were to pay some private landowner, they would have to pay anywhere between $20 and $30 for 1 cow. So this is a huge subsidized welfare program that we're probably a lot of people are familiar with. Corporations probably being the biggest abusers of welfare, if you want to call it that. Anyway, so that's why these cattle ranchers are there. So it's not about the disease. It's not about anything other than grass and who gets to eat it. Scientists, particularly with APHIS, they're the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, they've actually been testing a lot of the other wildlife, and they're finding that actually elk, who are actually with the cows year-round, they're finding somewhere between 40 and 50% of the elk have brucellosis disease. Coyotes are prone to it because they come and they eat the afterbirth. That's usually how this disease is spread. And buffalo and cows are never in the same place at the same time. There's always at least a 2 to 3 month gap. Brucella bacteria, when exposed to UV light, dies within 24 hours. So that's, an animal would have to come within a day and ingest the afterbirth to spread this disease. So it's all fear-based. It's all about grass and who gets to eat it. APHIS, the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, also something they did this year. There was actually plans to thin out the population by 1,000 because the Parks Department say they don't want more than 3,000 wild buffalo. And something I didn't mention was actually the Yellowstone buffalo. The reason why they are so important is because they are the last wild, genetically pure buffalo left on the continent. There's only about 7,000 to 8,000 in the whole continent, but only 3,400 are in Yellowstone Park, and those are the only ones that aren't raised like cows, behind a fence. They're allowed to be free roaming, up until they get chased by helicopters anyway. And so that's why they are the most important herd of buffalo on the continent left. So it's very important that these buffalo be allowed to populate, In 97, when all this was happening, there was 7,000 of them. Now there's 3,400. There's 2 years ago, there was signs of inbreeding. When we go and we'll go out in the field and we'll watch the buffalo. As long as they're in the park, they're safe. As soon as they leave the park, that's when they get harassed by Department of Livestock, either by snowmobiles, horses. If they have a big herd coming out, they'll chase them with helicopters. And what they did this year is they corralled them. They basically chased them in this corral area. I think they had about 600 of them. And every day they were bringing a cattle truck in and taking them off to slaughter. They were planning on killing 1,000. And one of our volunteers, a really good friend, his name's Comfrey Jacobs. He actually made CNN News. He's been there since the beginning of this season. We usually start our season in November. And he couldn't take it anymore, and he knew he would get arrested for doing this, but he took this big, huge metal barrel, filled it with cement and rebar and all kinds of metal, had these metal things coming out of it, and he chained himself and handcuffed himself to the cattle gate so they couldn't get through. So he was able to stop. Oh, and also we usually tell media what we're going to do before we do it, and it's all nonviolent things. So we had the media there, and CNN picked it up right away. It made it to CNN. 2 days later, it made it to NBC and CBS. So after that, they called off the whole hunt for the whole season. They were only able to kill about 400. Yeah. But unfortunately, they are still getting hazed right now. That's their way of being nice to the buffalo. Instead of corralling them and shipping them off to slaughter, they'll basically chase them back into the park, which they're leaving the park for a reason. It's because the snowpacks are really high, and it's, they come down to a place we call Horse Butte, which is the lower plateaus, and that's actually where the buffalo are born. It's the birthing grounds. It's also the place that's easiest for the babies to get grass. These newborn buffalo get chased by these helicopters, anywhere between 10 and 15 miles a day. So it's pretty intense. 2 years ago was the worst year for babies. I think it was almost 40 babies that we could count. I'm sure there was a lot more, but 40 babies died. Some of them had to be euthanized because of broken legs that they experienced while being hazed. A lot of adults get broken legs as well. We actually have tons of videos on YouTube. You could go to BFC Media and check out some of our stuff. Not all of it's bad. We try to put as much positive. I brought another DVD, but I'm not going to show it today. But it's basically a lot of good stuff. It's babies being born. It's babies playing. It's parents playing with the babies. We like to show also what could be. And it kind of coincides with the whole, the dream. Recreating that dream, because it was, speaking from a Lakota perspective, the buffalo, like we say when we came here, which actually I did this piece of art. I call it Wichampi Shakui, which is the Seven Sisters or the Pleiades, and this is our place of origin. So when we came here, we followed the buffalo here. So anyway, this is, if anybody wants to see this later. So I just distracted myself. But I remember one of the greatest quotes I ever heard was by a man who passed away. His name's George Carlin. And he said, the best thing about, the thing about the American dream is that you have to be asleep to believe it. And I resonate with that very much. Anyway, we'll be playing some music a little later, I think at lunchtime. And thank you for listening and being here. This is, it's a great honor to be here and to be with fellow dreamers as well. Thank you very much.